All right, so I'll be taking over for just this discussion for today. So if you go to the website or on Ed, I should have on the discussion six page or row, there should be a link to the GitHub Classroom for today's discussion project. Okay, so this discussion will be creating a mini like an app uh, which I prototype, which is like a sticky note app, I think, which is pretty cool. And we'll be filling through. So there's going to be scaffolding, there's going to be a bunch of code already, but we're just going to be filling some elements in it that will require animations that we learned in lecture six and some other new kind of concepts, which are called gestures. So we're going to see how we could implement different kinds of gestures into our applications to make it more interactive. And yeah, so are you guys able to get the repository or the code? Yes? Cool. All right. So I'm going to give you an overview of what is the code base, okay? So it's a really simple code base. There's only three files. So here we have what should look familiar to you. This is the view model and the model. So actually, before I got carried away, before I show you what the code base is, let's take a look at what we're building today. So this is our app. Right now, it looks really boring, but you can see we have a plus button here. Okay, let's see what happens if I click on it. There is a sticky note. All right, so I can type in the sticky note. I could say hello, and there we are. And I could delete it by clicking this X button. Okay, nothing cool. But what's cool about this is that I can press down and hold on it. And as you can see, it expands, it animates and expands. And as I drag, oops, sorry, let me back up. I could drag it around and I could place it anywhere that I drag to. And I could create multiple instances of my sticky notes, each with its own text state. And let's say that I overlap some of these sticky notes together, right? So my right sticky note is overlapping my bottom left sticky note, which is overlapping the top sticky note. Now, if I click on the top sticky note, the, I guess, intuitive behavior is that that sticky note that I just clicked on should surface up, but the other sticky notes, this one, their overlapping state should maintain the same, right? So if I click on this, you can see it surfaces up, but the other two, the overlapping behavior is the same. Now I could click on this one, and when I click on this one, it brings up the other two stay the same. So this is the cool. This is the app that you will be creating today. So I think it's pretty cool, and you get to kind of see the mechanisms behind this. Okay, so that's the app. So let's get through the code. So currently, again, this is all scaffolding that I've created. So what is a sticky note? Well, I represent it via this model. I called it a sticky, and it has a unique identifier with the UID so that I can use identifiable, which will explain why. And it has something called a Z index. And this is basically a number, in this case, which is a double, which is a decimal, that the greater the Z index, the greater, I guess, so think of it like a Z stack, right? If I have multiple sticky notes on top of each other, the one on top has the greatest Z index, and the further ones back has the smallest Z index. And here is my view model. And again, remember, our view model contains all the data for this app, the main data. So what is the main data? So I can create my sticky notes or stickies, and I stored them in this array here called this property called stickies. And then I have several helper functions that I have made public so that my main view can access the stickies or do operations on these six stickies. So I could create a sticky, I can remove a sticky. That's when I click the X button, and I can change a sticky index, Z index. So what this function is that when I'm holding on a sticky, I want that sticky Z index to be the greatest, and but the other ones stay the same, right? So that is what the function is for. So that's, I call this function when we are holding on to a particular sticky. Any questions there? Okay, pretty simple kind of API. All right, so now let's go to our content view. So again, this is where the meat of everything is located. Uh, it's a pretty simple UI, nothing too crazy going on. So in our content view, we have our instantiation or creation of our view model. And here we have a navigation stack. And on the navigation stack, or in this navigation stack, I have a Z stack. And that's how I'm able to create this 3D effect, right? The layering effect. So the subsequent, and then I'm going through all my stickies in my view model, and I'm displaying it via the sticky view. And I'm passing that sticky instance into sticky view. So the sticky view is actually that yellow sticky note itself. And then there's a view modifier called z-index that can apply to any view, and that specifies the z-index. So the greater the z-index, the further front it is to the user. And I'm passing the view model into my sticky view so that I can get access to the view model in the sticky view. And this is the plus button. Here in my sticky view, I have my view model that I got from my environment that I passed in. This is my sticky that I passed in explicitly. And these are four state private variables that we'll be using to implement these drag gestures. So in the body, our main view is basically the sticky itself, the rounded rectangle, it's yellow, and so forth. And we have the scale effect modifier that we've seen in lecture on Tuesday. And this is when I hold on a sticky, I want it to animate to 120% versus, and then if I'm not holding it, I want to shrink back to the default 150 by 150 points. I'm overlaying on top of this the sticky note with my text field right here. That's the type here that you've seen. And here on the Z stack here, this is where I have the delete button. Again, you don't need to worry about the UI, it's just there. And here's the delete button itself. Okay, nothing too crazy. So our goal here in this view right here is to implement the drag gesture. So when I'm dragging on the sticky note, and if I drop it, it should stay in its new position. And then here on the actual sticky note itself here, I want to add this on long press gesture. So when I hold on it, I want for it to kind of expand. Okay. So that's the on long press gesture view modifier here. Okay. So we're going to take a look into these two at the moment, but any questions about the code itself? Does this make sense? Okay, cool. And of course, a third file. This is our standard uh, Xcode file that Xcode generates for us. And this is our entry point into the app. So when the app launches, what's the first thing that we're going to present? That's our content view. So we're not going to change anything there. All right, so navigate to the view model, and we're going to be filling these three functions. Now, you don't need to worry about the UI at all for this. Just given what you're presented to here, create a sticky and add it to stickies, which is this property right here, with initial z-index of the number of stickies that we currently have. Okay. And then given a sticky, we want to remove a sticky from stickies. Sorry, a lot of stickies here. And then here we want to, okay, this is the most interesting thing. I was playing around yesterday and I realized that you could determine this policy of, so again, this function, when I hold a sticky, I want to update its z-index to be the highest. And and the other ones remain unchanged. And you could do this in a single line. Okay. And I think in your code, there's a hint there, which talks about like dates or something, right? So in this function, it should be just only a single line. But these guys, you could do this in a single line. This might be in a couple of lines. So I'm gonna give you guys like 5 minutes to try to figure these out. Talk to your neighbors. This is a great way to kind of meet new people and also talk through these ideas. And yeah, we're gonna come back and then I'm gonna show you what I've done. I think there's probably other options, but this is the kind of thing that I've thought of. So yeah, any questions before we let you guys loose? All right. Yeah, go ahead and talk to your neighbors and try to figure out these three functions. Yeah. And when you fill, for example, when you finish create sticky, you can go to content view or you could run in the simulator. And since I should have added it to here, it's already there already. So you could try pressing on it to see if it shows or not. Okay. All right. All right. Yeah. Is it pertaining to your?
I show you.
Oh,
It's downloaded. It's the M4 that we were talking
yeah. Hey, nice, nice. Oh, all right, talk amongst yourselves. I'm not hearing you talk.
about. Yeah.
It's not like I don't. The touch bar. Oh, you should click. Isn't what's it? It's okay. You can download it. So okay. Okay, yeah, I think so. I think so. All right, how are we doing? Are we doing good? Yes. All right. Do you want to get started or yes? No? Okay, let's get started. Again, there's probably a bunch of ways to do this smarter than me. But I'm just trying to showcase some stuff. Okay. So to create a sticky, all right, can someone kind of walk me through of what they did for this part right here? Any brave souls? It's okay. We're not going to judge. This is a no judgment zone. So, in fact, if you have a mistake, that's totally fine. So, what should I do here? Right. Yes, exactly. So I'm gonna call this new sticky. Again, there's other ways you could style this, but is it okay? Xcode is all right. The predictive code completion model is yeah, Xcode, very nice. That's exactly what you should be doing. So you instantiate a new sticky instance, and then for the Z index, you just basically have passed in the stickies count, number of stickies, but the Z index is a double, which is a decimal, but stickies count is an integer. So we have to convert an integer to a double by using the double syntax like this. So what's the next step? So we create our sticky, but I need to add it to my stickies array. How do I do that? How do I do that? Yes. Append, very good. So stickies the append, my new sticky. All right, so let's check. So let's go to our content view. And so if I click on my plus button, voila, my sticky's there. All right. But however, when I try to click on it, the X button, nothing works. So let's go back to our view model and let us remove a sticky. Any ideas of how we could do this? Again, there's multiple methods of doing this. So there's no right or wrong answer. But yeah, any ideas what you do to remove a sticky? Any ideas? Mhm. Yes, there is remove. So stickies dot remove. So you could see okay, Xcode already has suggested this remove all. So what remove all does is that it accepts a closure and you basically put in the condition that you want to remove from, for all your stickies. So if this condition is true, then we remove that sticky. And in this case, we want to remove all stickies whose ID is equal to the sticky.id property, right? So that works. So that is one option. Another option is that you could just do the stickies.remove at right here. And remove at specifies or requires an integer, and that's the index that we want to remove from stickies. And so we need to first calculate the index of the sticky in stickies. So to do that, I could do stickies dot first index where what's the condition? Where that sticky ID is equal to the sticky ID that I got right here. And this returns a what? This returns a optional index. Okay, it returns an optional integer. So I need to do something called an optional binding to unwrap the optional. So to do optional binding, I use if let's say remove index equals, and then now I have this remove index, which is unwrapped, which is of type an index. You can think of it as just an integer. And then I could just do stickies dot remove at remove index. Okay. So these are two identical ways to solve the same problem. One with the remove all method and passing in a closure, and the other one where we unwrap or we actually find the first index and it gives us an optional. So we have to unwrap it via optional binding and then use the remove at method and pass that remove index in. Okay, so two identical ways. There's probably other ways there, but these are um, the ways that we could do this. All right. So now let's head back to content view. And in our Swift UI preview, let's take a look if now we could delete our sticky. So let's click on here. Voila. Now it's gone. Okay. So let's go to your remodel again. Now, has anyone thought of, sorry, I left out that hint in your code, but it was relating to dates. Okay. I know this is a bit tricky. Um, there's other ways to do this again, but this is just one idea that I had. So does anyone, it's one liner. Does anyone have any ideas of what we could do for here? Any ideas? How can I, when I hold a sticky, I want that z index to be the greatest while maintaining the other z index, the other sticky z indexes. All right. So has anyone looked at dates? Well, think about dates, okay? What can I do here with dates? Again, the currently, I tap on a sticky. I want that sticky z index to be the greatest. Now, okay, so dates, time. What can I do? Is the time right now greater than the time a second ago, 2 seconds ago, a month ago? So what can I do? Any ideas? Yes. Yeah, something like that. So you can think about the current time as a number, right? And the current time right now, that number is greater than the current time or that time number a second ago or 2 seconds ago, or so forth. So what we could do is that we could do a sticky dot z index equals on the date there is a property called uh okay there's these two options. So time interval since 1970. Um, and so what you could do is that you could basically, oops, sorry, not this one. It's the date time interval since reference date, I think, this one. And so you could set the z index to this basically reference date since. So this is basically a time interval from January 2021 and the current date and time. So you could set that z index to be this date, which is now converted as a double, as a decimal. And so when I hold or select a new sticky, that time interval since reference date is going to be greater than the one before it. So when you think about that, every time that you hold a sticky, that z index is always going to be increasing. And now this might be not optimal because uh, computers they store integers and numbers with a finite amount of precision. Most computers nowadays they're called 64-bit. So what that means is that there are, if you think of binary, there's 64 slots that you can place data. And we don't need to worry about that for now because 64 bits a number is a big number. And so, it will take the whole, the sun to gobble up all of our planets. And maybe that we still have time for those for 64 slots. So we don't need to worry about that. But again, this might not be the optimal way, but this is a pretty kind of clever way of dealing with this issue. Okay. So let's take a look if that I can't take a look at that behavior right now because we need to implement the drag gesture. Okay. So let's go to your content view and let's take a look at how we could implement a drag gesture to allow the sticky to be moved and stay in its new position. So what I like to do is that when you're coding, it's nice to kind of reference the documentation, right? So I have this idea and I want to implement a functionality where I can drag this view around and I think it's has to do with the drag gesture somehow. So what I could do is that I could go to my uh go to the, uh, all right, we are going to the SwiftUI documentation, right? And then, sorry, I have a lot of, don't, don't worry about that. My computer's doing fine. So we're gonna take a look at the documentation. This is the first thing that you should do. Okay, so when you're experimenting, I want to look at this doc. So we have a drag gesture, a drag motion that invokes an action as the drag event sequence changes. So this is sort of what I'm looking at. And usually in SwiftUI Apple's documentation, there are sample code, and there's also guides where you could articles where you could go through and read about sample code and different kind of other function implementations and more advanced features. But let's take a look at this, for example. So it looks like we can create a drag gesture, and we could see that it has these two, I guess, like modifiers on it called onChanged and onEnded. And onChanged is when, for example, when I am dragging that view around and you know it's the values of where I'm dragging it's changing, right? I'm dragging it, it's changing, and then when I release, that's when the on ended gets triggered. So I'm able to kind of subscribe to these events, so I can know when the user is dragging actively, and I know when the user lifts his or her finger off, and I can observe that with the on ended closure. And I could, add that drag gesture onto some view. In this case, it's a circle via the dot gesture view modifier. So this is sort of like what your process should be when you're trying to add a new feature that you don't know how to do it. Look through the docs and see what kind of things that you can take away from it. So that's what we're trying to do. So we're going to create a drag gesture. So on here, we're gonna we need to create a drag gesture using the gesture view modifier, like so. And on here, we need to create a drag gesture. And now you can see a drag gesture has a lot of different other parameters that we could add into it. For example, the minimum distance that the user needs to drag in order for it to be triggered. But we don't need to worry about that for now. So we're just going to create a drag gesture just like that. Okay. Now we need to observe when the user is dragging and when the user has lifted his or her finger. So we're going to use the on changed, and it's a closure, and we're going to get a value out of it. And on this value, we could see we have different properties of this drag gesture. We could see the exact location on the screen, and it's represented by a CG point. The CG prefix stands for core graphics. And it's a library built into the operating system, or into Apple's operating systems, and it has a lot of features for like graphical stuff. But one of them is CG point, and it's just basically a point with an X and Y value. So, and then we also have a thing called translation, and that is the total, I guess, translation from the start gesture to the current event of the drag gesture. And it's the CG size property. So what is a CG size? So you could, again, take a look at the documentation. So you could right click, sorry, not right click, option click it, and you could see the pop up. It shows that it's a structure, it's a struct that contains width and height values. And it's basically, if you take in some sort of math, it's basically a distance vector. Okay. So it encodes information about how far something started origin to its new location via a width and height kind of vector. So, okay. And then let's go back to, oops, sorry, where am I? Okay, so now let's add our on ended closure. Oops, not unchanged, on ended. And we could see that it gives us another parameter here. And what is it? It's the same thing as well. It's the same thing as the one in onChanged. Okay. So from this, let's take a look at what we're given. So this is the text for that sticky. That's not, we don't really care about that because we're implementing dragging position. That's not part of our logic. But these two guys are pretty important. So one is the position of where the sticky is and our drag offset. So the offset from where it originated, which is the center of the screen. Okay. So when we're changing, right, when we're dragging, what do we want to do? We want to update our drag offsets and set it to be equal to the translation to what we're dragging. So the offset from the original location when we're dragging. All right. Um, and then okay. So when we're ended, we want to do what? So we have our position. This is our new position, right? This is a position of the sticky note. So when we're ended, we want to update the positions with property to be equal to the one that we're ended. So we're going to add the width offset from when I lifted off my finger to the position right here. And we're going to do that same thing for the height. So translation dot height. And we want to now change our drag offset to be 0. So we want to reset the drag offset each time. Okay. Now, this still won't do anything, right? So if you tried it out in the previews, nothing will work. Why is that? Well, because we need to specify the position of this main view. So there is a position view modifier, and but we could do that. But there's also another view modifier called offset. So an offset basically specifies where this main view is offsetted from its original creation, which is the center. And so we can calculate the offset, correct offset of this main view based on position and drag offset. So what we could do is that we could set the offset of our main view via the position dot width. So the position that I'm, the coordinates of the position of the main view or the sticky note plus the drag offset. So when I'm dragging, right, I'm basically getting the change. So I need to add the change of the width to that sticky note's original position. Okay. And then for the Y, it's the same thing, but now I'm doing the height property of it. Okay. So like that. Okay. So again, when I'm dragging, I'm basically capturing the changes, the from where I originally dragged it, and I'm adding it to my current position. And that's how I could drag it around and it will basically stay with my finger. Right. So that is the logic for the drag gesture behavior. All right. And then when I ended, right, when I lift my finger, this is the final translation width. This is the final offset width when I lift my finger, and I want to add it to my actual position. I do the same thing for the height, but I need to reset my drag offset back to 0. So when I drag it again next time, this will uh you know uh this will become 0. So now I'm just left with my new position values. Okay. So let's take a look in our simulator here. All right. So now you can see I can drag it now. And if I let go somewhere, it stays. I know it's a bit confusing, but there's a lot going on. But that is sort of what you could do with drag gestures now. So now I can create multiple sticky notes and I can drag them wherever I want to do. Okay. And I can now click. Uh, okay. I haven't implemented that functionality yet, but I can still delete the other ones and things like that. Okay. Any questions here? Okay, that's how you could do a drag gesture. Alrighty. So now let's go to our last part. This is the on long press gesture view modifier. Okay, so we're going to go to the docs and we are going to take a look at the SwiftUI long press gesture. Um, you can see that we have a bunch of different parameters that it accepts. It has the minimum duration. So when is you can specify the minimum duration or time in seconds for the long press gesture to activate, you could you could perform some action here, and also you can get feedback whether the pressing or state changes or not. Okay. So we're going to use this to do our behavior. When we hold on it, we want it to animate and kind of expand just a little bit. Okay. So that gives some, brings some liveliness into our application. So holding on it, I want it to kind of, expand a little bit. Okay. So this expanding behavior, like I mentioned, is done via the scale effective view modifier. And I have this at state variable called is holding. When that's true, I want to expand it to 120%. Otherwise, when it's false, I want to shrink it back to its default size of 150 points by 150 points. So uh, we will add our long press gesture modifier on our rounded rectangle. So on long press gesture. And what we're going to do here is that we're going to subscribe to, and again, in Xcode, what you could do, for example, in this case, I want, so perform, okay, so you can see how minimum duration, maximum distance, and on-pressing changed has a lighter color than perform. What that means is that minimum duration, maximum distance, and on-pressing changed are optional parameters. So you don't need to pass them in. Whereas perform, you need to, that's required. So you can see that there's a chevron here. And then when I right arrow key it, I could see all of the available possible combinations for on long press gesture. So I can choose the exact one that I want from this menu. Or what I could do is that I can type just a few prefixes of certain parameters and Xcode is going to complete it for me. So I want just the on pressing changed parameter here. So what I'm gonna do is I could just type on, oh, it's just press O. And you can see Xcode knows that, hey, there's a O. None of the other parameters start with O. So that means you want on pressing changed. And it shows this new, more bolder color here. So when I click enter, Xcode selects the correct version. Perform is required, but I selected the on pressing changed one. Okay, so that's something, a pro tip. All right, these are closures. You press enter, and now we're in trailing closure syntax here. Okay, so uh, when we press the gesture, um, uh, what we want to do is we want to for now we don't need to do we won't to do anything. Okay, we will do all of the behavior when this on pressing changed closure. So we can observe. So this gives us a boolean if we're pressing it or if or we're not. So what we can do is that we could name this. Okay, I can name this variable, sorry, parameter, whatever I want to be. So I'm calling it is pressing. And in here, what do we want to do? So when I long press on a sticky note, or what's the behavior? Ideas? Give you a hint right there. So again, one of the behaviors is that when I long press on the sticky note, I want it to scale up. So what should I do? What's one thing I need to do here? Yes. Exactly. So what we're gonna do is that we're gonna change is holding and we're gonna set it equal to is pressing. Okay. So is holding is I'm pressing on a sticky note. That's going to be true, and I'm going to set that to is holding. And then here, it's going to animate the scale effect. So let's take a look. So now I'm here. So if I hold on it, you could see that it does scale up. You see that? But right now it's really stoppy. It's instantaneous. I want to make it animate. I want it to kind of, have some animation. I want to interpolate between the values of 1 and 1.2 or 1.2 to 1, vice versa. So what can I do here so that SwiftUI interpolates the original value to the new value? What do I need to do? Yes. Yes. With animation, that's right. So what I want you to do is I wrap this with animation. And if you don't specify the animation, it's just the default SwiftUI animation. Okay, so now when I click here, ah, you see that? And now it has this kind of animation effect. And you can also specify what kind of animation you want. So maybe, ooh, a bouncy one. Maybe some spiciness into it. So now you could see there is some bounce to it a little bit. Or you could maybe, you want to prefer more of a spring type of uh, feel, right? There we go. Just like that. Okay, so it's a bit more stiffer here than the bouncy one. So, um, yeah. So that is that behavior. What's the next thing that we need to do here? What do we need to change? Not quite done yet, right? So, okay then. So I'm gonna create additional sticky notes, right? Ah, what's one thing that we haven't done yet? It changes the index. Okay. So how do I do that? What's one thing that we did 20 minutes ago? What do we need to do? Yes, that's correct. So so we do how do I do that? How do I get the function that we just implemented? Like I don't have my function here. Like where's my function? I don't see it. I don't see it in sticky view. Right. So what do I get our function that we just created in the view model? Yes.
You did it like a week ago.
Yeah, this thing right here. So that is the at environment property wrapper, and we're specifying what do we want to get, what do we want to select? We want to select the Stickies view model, and we're capturing it as a variable. Where is this? Where is this passed in? Where is this coming from? Right? Is it just appearing randomly? Is it just like, you know, I guess Xcode knows exactly what I'm doing and it's just giving me right away. Where is the source of this, right? Like where is it located? Yes. Invisible. What do you mean by invisible?
You can tell it to show us if we want.
We need to do through code still. Um, if you hint, it's somewhere in content view. Where are we getting that environment from? It's one of these lines. We have time. What line here gives us the view model in our stickies view? Is it line 10, line 11, line 12, line 13, line 14, line 15, line 16, line 17, line 18? Which line is it? Line 19. Why? Exactly. Thank you. So here we created our instance of view model and we're injecting that view model into Sticky View's environment, right? And Sticky View, we could get that out of its environment via this, right? So now below, we could call view model dot change sticky z index for our sticky. What is our sticky? We're sticky. We got it from here, right? So sticky. Now on the on pressing change closure gets called when I'm pressing it and then when I release it. But I only want to change the sticky in the NX when I just press it initially. So what I could do is I just wrap this around with the is press, if it's is pressing, and then I trigger that function update. So when I now click on this plus button, right, and we create more instances of our sticky notes. Now, if I overlap the right one to the left one, if I overlap the bottom one to all of them, and I click on the left one, this sticky z index will now be the current time that I pressed on it as a decimal, and that z index should surface all the way up. And the other ones, their z index has been not changed. Yes.
Every time we create a new sticky, why don't we just set it to
Yeah, so you could also do, I think, the current time as well. That's another option as well. You for the issue with I think the count using the stickies count is like if you delete the stickies, then it's kind of, I think the behavior might be a bit different. Um, so now, for example, when you create a new sticky, that it could because right now, okay, right now it's just appear. Okay, so for example, if I create a new sticky note here, um, if sorry, if I okay, let's just delete all these guys. Um, okay, let's just leave one here. Delete this guy. Um, you know, now this guy right here would be just one. And if okay, sorry, let me explain. So okay, so if I pretend this has some, like, for example, its index is like 10 or something, right? If I click here, um, hmm, maybe I guess that would work. There might be some edge cases. I'm not quite sure. Okay, you might need to play around with it. But yeah, that might work. That might work. Yeah, it just depends on what your behavior you want. So yeah, I think that might be an option. Okay, yeah, good question. All right. It's 6 o'clock, so hopefully you have fun. Um, I would appreciate some more participation. It's a bit quiet in here. Again, there's no wrong or right answer. This is a learning zone, so don't be afraid to make mistakes. So for next time, I would like, if you guys could participate a little bit more. All right.